Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Discovery Season 5, Episode 10, Life Itself, the series finale of Star Trek Discovery. So I'll have to start with a spoiler warning for this series finale of Discovery. If you have not seen all the episodes of Discovery, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. Now, before I got started with this review, I wanted to first let you all know that I'll be doing a live discussion on Star Trek Discovery Season 5 as a whole. I'll be joined by my sister Alyssa, and we're going to be doing a live stream this Monday night, 9 p.m. East Coast time. I'll have the link in the description below so you can check out that live event. So, last week I said that this would be a really great season of Star Trek, one of the better seasons of Trek, unless the finale completely fucked it up and ruined it, and made the whole season in retrospect terrible. So did that happen? No, it absolutely did not. However, another thing I said is that if the finale was really great, then this could end up being a top tier, one of my favorite seasons of all Star Trek. Now, was the finale that great to elevate this season to make it one of my favorite seasons of Star Trek? No, that didn't happen either. Now, I will say that this season of Season 5 of Discovery would probably be in my top 15 favorite seasons of Star Trek, which is maybe even possibly top 10. I don't know. I'd have to look at it, but I'm definitely pretty sure top 15, positive top 20. And mind you, there are quite a few seasons of Star Trek. I think there's 35. So, no, more than top 20. Definitely top 15. Maybe top 10. But not top 5. It didn't crack that top 5, which I thought it might do. But I don't think it did. Because here's the thing about this finale. I liked it. I liked it a lot. Actually, I thought it was really, really good, but some things about it I didn't like. There were some things that I didn't think were terrible. I just thought could have been handled a little better. So, first off, I'll start with the whole thing of Burnham going into that infinite dimensional land. I really like this. This reminds me actually a lot, and I was going to mention this last week because I was also reminded a lot of this last week, but definitely reminded a bit more this week. And I wonder if the writers of this episode are familiar with this. There was a series of non-canon Star Trek novels called Gateways, which was, an ongoing series that followed, like, it had a bunch of different books from a bunch of different series that made up the series. So it had one from the original series, Next Gen, DS9, Voyager, the made up book Star Trek series that had New Frontier and other stuff like that, and they're all centered on the theme of these Iconian gateways opening up all over the place. And so each of those, books ended with the captain going through the gateway and ending up beyond wherever. And then there was one novel that finished up that was like the conclusion of all those novels that says What Lay Behind, where it shows it had a short story for each separate book, and it shows what the captain experienced once they went beyond this portal. And one of them, I think it was the DS9 one, which, by the way, the DS9 series, this took place after the show finished, so Major Kira, or Captain Kira now, or was it Colonel Kira still? And I think she was in Starfleet at this time. Maybe it was Captain. No, maybe it was before she joined Starfleet. This is the books. She joined Starfleet in the books. But anyway, Kira went through the portal and she went back in time to some Bajoran thingy-majigger, which I thought was boring. But after that, she went and saw an Iconian, who is like this, mythical creature who's working on this council and asking questions about life and everything, and they're being very cryptic, and sends her back. And I think the Next Generation one with Picard was also had him meeting up with the Iconians and them being all cryptic and weird and shit. So you can probably see why I was reminded of that with these two episodes. So I do wonder if the writers were aware of this and basing it off of that, which, if that's the case, I think that would be perfectly fine because these things were never canon. Now, this isn't such an original idea. I'm sure a lot of movies and shows have done similar things like this before, but we hadn't seen it in Star Trek canon, so it is interesting that they did something like this in actual canon and not just novels that are just not canon. But this was very similar to the novels, I think. Even if there are other movies or shows that did something similar, I don't think it would be as similar as that. I mean, the progenitors kind of reminded me, the way they're portrayed in this episode remind me a lot of how the Iconians were portrayed in that book. Which, by the way, I didn't think actually stuck to canons about how the Iconians actually were. But that's another topic entirely. But I actually like that. I like that it reminded me of that, and I love the whole feel of stepping in this portal and seeing this weird infinite space, which looked absolutely beautiful. And, they have a couple Breen in there for her to attack, okay. I like the sequence with them fighting in the hurricane or whatever. It was pretty cool. It was a good fight sequence and whatnot. And then her having to work together with Maul to try to discover the technology. Now, I will say that the fighting sequences with Discovery and the stuff with Saru having to talk to the Breen, whatever they're called, I wasn't really all that interested in. I thought it was kind of just like, oh, we need some action going on in this episode, and it wasn't that interesting. I mean, we got a moment with Raynor, saying you're a good crew or whatever, and boosting up the crew, but I feel like they've already done that in previous episodes, so it's just more of the same. I guess the part of this storyline that took place outside the portal that I did really, really like was the character moments we got between I was going to say Wilson Cruz, but that's the actor's name. What's the character's name? Culber. With Culber and how he decides what, has that feeling of what he's meant to do. And I think this actually justifies the scenes we got with him early in our season where he's like, oh, I feel like something's changed, or something's different, and it's just a feeling he doesn't know, but he ends up it was a very sort of fantastical feel when a character is has their destiny and they know, oh, I have a feeling this is what I'm meant to do, and yet they do it in a way that can be explained by Star Trek science jargon, not real science, but Star Trek science that fits in this universe. So I like that a lot, and I love the scene where he wanted to go with Book, and Stamets was really upset, and so was Adira, and they were both like, you shouldn't go, it's too dangerous, but Culber was insisting this is what I meant to do, and they sort of have that embracing moment. Now, I've heard some people complain that we didn't get a scene at the end of the episode with Culber and Stamets, since they're like the power couple of Discovery and the first, of course, same-sex couple in the Star Trek franchise. But I think we get it here. So I'm okay that they don't need to do it again at the end of the episode. I think it's fine to do it here. And the way they do it, I thought was very powerful. And then, of course, Culber on the shuttle with Book and knowing exactly the frequency or whatnot. So that stuff I really liked. The stuff with Saru and the shuttle talking to the Breen, I didn't hate it. And Nan was just there because, hey, let's bring her back for the final episode. But she didn't really do anything, but whatever. At least she didn't say yum yum. I will say that. But anyway, so yeah, the stuff with Saru was fine. Like, the way he tricked them and like to reveal information and sort of did the gambit. And by the way, they never really made it clear if he was bluffing. I think maybe it was implied because Nan was like, remind me not to play some whatever game with you or whatever. So it was fine. Like, I thought it was decent. Like, I didn't hate it and I didn't love it, but it was fine. It was fine. I mean, I do like that they included Saru in the finale because we've been missing him for most of the season. So at least they gave him something to do. I'm fine with that. The whole thing with Discovery, like splitting in half and surrounding the Breen ship and like spore jumping it, they never even came close to implying that Discovery could do this. Now, I know the naysayers would be like, well, they never said Discovery couldn't do it, but so what? They never even implied that Discovery could do this. And not that I hate it, again, not that I think it was dumb, but I was just like, whatever about that. Oh, they spore jump it to the thing. It just seemed like a convenient way to solve the situation. So, again, I didn't think it sucked, but it contributed to the fact that I wasn't that interested in this storyline and I wasn't that enthralled with how it was resolved. But anyway, so to the main point of Burnham with the progenitor's technology, I do like the scenes when she's talking to the progenitor. I thought that was very fascinating, and the way they played it was like a good character moment for Burnham, sort of resolving her character stories. Now, getting to Burnham's character story, I think her main flaw, her main journey, or her main character flaw throughout the show was that she was too attached and that she couldn't let go of, and this caused problems when people needed to sacrifice themselves in order to save humanity, and she wouldn't do that. She wouldn't make the sacrifices, and she almost got the entire sentient life wiped out in season 2 because she wouldn't let she wouldn't let Airiam go. And then this fall came up over and over again. I feel like if you're going to wrap up Burnham's character arc, you should address that, and I don't think they did particularly. Now, to be fair, they did address this at the end of Season 4, so maybe they think, well, Season 4 took care of this, so we don't need to bring it up again, but I don't think that's the case. I don't think that solved anything, because after all, Book came back to life and wasn't really dead, so, I mean, did she really sacrifice? I mean, but she was willing to, though, I suppose. But I still feel like they should have at least mentioned it again this season. But here it was more of her acknowledging her flaws about keeping people at a distance, and I wasn't really all that clear actually on what kind of character members. Although the argument could be made that the fact that she gave up the progenitor's technology was her learning to let things go. But I don't think that analogy would hold, though, because what I mean by let things go, I mean like people she loves and things that she loves and cares about. And she doesn't love and care about the progenitor's technology. It was just scientifically fascinating and like this huge chance to change all of the face of the Alpha Quadrant of all sentient life. So that doesn't really address her main character flaw, in my opinion. I could skirt it because she is still willing to let go of something that she thinks is going to be great for humanity, and her character revelation is learning that no, we're not ready for it, and she learns to let it go. Okay, so maybe it does address it a little bit. So maybe they did address it a little bit, but I think they could have done more about it. And I was initially turned off by the fact that she was like, "Oh, we're not ready for it. Let's just send it back to the thing." Not that I think that's the wrong decision. I actually think that is the right decision. But because it's a little cliche, and it was maybe a bit too predictable, that's what because I couldn't imagine them actually using the progenitor's technology and like changing the face of the Federation and the whole quadrant and like being able to, do all this weird scientific stuff. It kind of takes away from the idea of exploration and discovering things if they just have everything right there and they can create entire sentient lives. That does seem like too much power for them, so I don't know, it kind of renders the entire season a little pointless. It's just all about the Indiana Jones adventure and why did it take her to the end to figure out that, oh yeah, we're not ready for this? Because I could have told you that during the times when the Breen were fucking attacking you and there's all these wars and there's battles over this thing. I think that made it clear. Like if I was progenitor and she was talking about, oh, my friends are fighting, and was like, if they're fighting, then you're not ready for this fucking technology. So I don't know why it took her so long to figure this out, which I could have told her that 4 or 5 episodes ago. But anyway, I did, however, like the scene when she returned to the ship and explained what she did, or explained what she wanted to do to everyone. And I love that interaction between the crew and how different people interacted. And that Stamets was the most upset because he's the scientifically minded one. And he was like, this is a chance for a huge scientific discovery, so he's looking at it through the eyes of a scientist, where the others can see the greater implications, the bigger picture of what it would do to sentient life that as they know it in the galaxy, I should say. And so I love that dynamic. I love that different interaction. I love how Adira even had their own moment in this show, where they, explained it to Stamets and had that sort of moment, where Stamets had that fatherly moment and was like, when did you grow so wise? Again, nice little moment. And this is a thing I do really like about this episode, is that pretty much every character did get their time to shine, which is not easy to do. Even though this was an extended episode, this was like a double episode essentially, it's still not easy to give every character their moment. And I think this especially when you have a storyline that's so Burnham focused, but I think they did do a really good job of at least giving every character, even Raynor, when he had that moment where you're a great crew, that was his moment. Tilly maybe didn't get that much of a play, but she did have that moment with Raynor on the bridge as well, so maybe they could have done more with her. But I think overall they did a really good job of showing everyone, except for Reno. She just had a non-speaking role. It's barely appeared in this episode. I wanted more Reno, but it went anyway. But yeah, so that was a nice moment when they had that discussion and they agreed that the best thing to do was to get rid of the technology. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like that was the easy, predictable thing. And it does say, well, what's the point of going on all these fun adventures? Oh, the journey is the point. But I guess, I don't know. It's just not that interesting to me. But the other thing I want to talk about is Locke and Mole, because I'm actually surprised that they didn't bring Locke back to life. I was completely convinced that they would. And you know what? I'm actually a little disappointed that they didn't. I actually think it would have been more interesting if they did. Now, if they did not, I could see there's a character, angle that you could take with that story of Mole having to move on, which is, something that a real life lesson that a lot of people need to learn is how to move on after losing someone so near and dear to your heart and how difficult it is. And they touched on that a little bit with the scene with her in Book, where Book was explained that he knows how it feels because he lost his entire family and this whole world. And so he could see that it would be difficult for her to do it, but he was like leading by example, saying, hey, I was able to go out and make something good of my life, and you could do the same. But I don't think that was enough to justify that. And I don't know. I just would find it more interesting if they did bring Locke back. I don't know. I think because the characters were like portrayed as villains and thugs or whatever, I think it would have been a fitting ending for them to actually live happily ever after and not have to be on the run or be fugitives anymore. And I think, well, some people might not like the implications of, there's this technology that can bring people back to life, but let's be fair now. Star Trek has had actually many examples where they could fucking do that without needing progenitor's technology. There's the whole Borg nanoprobe thing from Voyager episode. What was it called? Mortal Coil, where 7-9 brought Neelix back to life. And you could say, well, he hadn't been dead that long. But Locke had been in stasis, so technically he hadn't been dead that long either because they had him in stasis. So they should have got their hands on some nanoprobes. or whatever the fuck McCoy did in Star Trek Into Darkness to bring Kirk back to life. I can't even remember. What was it? Use Khan's like super blood. All you need is like genetically engineered blood. But then again, that's the Kelvin universe, and fuck the Kelvin universe. But still, I think it would have been more interesting if they brought Locke back to life. And I can see a lot of people disagreeing with me here, and that's fair. But what they said, what the progenitor said, if I'm remembering correctly, it's hard because they kind of talked in riddles a bit. But correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the progenitor said that we could not bring a person back from the dead, but we can recreate them and they can have all the same memories. So it'd be like making a clone of someone who's passed away. And I think Burnham was dishonest by telling... Well, okay, not dishonest, but she was lying by omission. Let me put it that way. Because she was honest when she told Mole, we cannot bring Locke back. That's the truth. And that's what the progenitor told her. But she's lying by omission by not bringing up the fact that we could recreate him. And this creates a whole other sort of moral dilemma, which I actually think would have been interesting if they actually addressed it. And I think that Burnham made this deep promise, I'll do everything I can to bring Locke back to life or to help you restore him. And she broke that promise by not telling her about this. Now you could say, well, he said, that's actually not bringing Locke back to life, but it's similar, so she should at least present Maul with all the options. If I'm remembering this correctly. I only watched the episode once. I didn't go back and rewatch it. But that was how I understood. And so, I don't know. That makes me think a little less of Burnham, if that is the case. That she didn't at least bring that option up to Maul. Now, you could argue, well, Maul's very emotional and upset, so of course she's going to take that option, but maybe that's not what would be best for her. But that's still not fucking Burnham's choice. She took that choice away from Maul. I don't know. And I feel like the reason why they did this, they wrote it this way, is because they assumed there would be a season 6, and they were setting Maul up to be this character, because she said, oh, she's going to work for Kovic because Kovic is like, she could be useful. So I think the reason why they didn't bring Locke back or even give that option is because they wanted to set her up to be this agent for Kovic in the next season. That's just my guess. I don't have any evidence about that. But that would, and now there's not going to be another season. So it's kind of a waste. Now, there are other Star Trek shows happening, that other chances they could bring Maul back, but I kind of doubt that they will, to be perfectly honest. So I think they should have just given her a happy ending with Locke. And yeah, you can say, well, there's technology that brings people back to life, but Burnham's like throwing it away, and so they won't have that technology anyway. And it's not really bringing people back to life if you stick to the script. It's actually, making a carbon copy of a person. But, which, I don't know, I guess some people might find that fucked up. But maybe they could have wrote it a different way where they actually could resurrect him. As I said, if Borg nanoprobes can do it, then what good is this fucking technology if it can't even do what Borg nanoprobes can do? I'm not saying, I'm just saying. Anyway, speaking of Kovic, he's Crewman Daniel. I don't know how I feel about that. It seemed a bit hokey. It seemed, especially having. I got flashbacks to season 3 of Picard of, when they had all the ships and Data had all his keepsakes, and look at all these Easter eggs and shit that this is from the other show. Anyway, I got that same feeling in Kovic's office when he had like the Geordie's visor and Cisco's baseball. I'm like, alright, it's a bit silly. He should have, if it's Crewman Daniels, though, he should have something from Archer. I don't know what Archer's signature thing would be. Maybe a statue of Porthos? I don't know. Jeez. Or that stupid cap that he used to wear. God, those caps look so goofy. But anyway, yeah, I mean, wasn't the Temporal Wars taking place a century before? I guess they could say he's a century old because it's the future. People can live for a lot longer. McCoy lived for over 100 years. So maybe they are saying he's over a century old, and maybe there's time travel shenanigans involved. But, I mean, and here's the thing. It's kind of similar. People could make the analogy to Into Darkness again when, they arrested Khan, or they thought his name was something else, John Harriman or whatever the fuck. And they're talking to him in the brig, and he's like, my name is Khan. And to Kirk and Spock, they're like, okay, fine, that's a cool sounding name, but why do I care? It doesn't really have any significance because they don't know who the fuck Khan is. And it's kind of the same thing here with Burnham, where he says, my actual name is Agent Daniels. And she's like, okay, cool name, bro, but she doesn't know who the fuck that crewman or Agent Daniels is, so it means nothing to her. Now, of course, it means something to the audience, just like the Khan thing does, but it doesn't mean anything to the character. Unless she, studied the past or whatever. And all right, I'm going to go off on a side rant here. And this is something I talked about a lot, about how the Discovery crew is from the 23rd century, and I think a lot that instead of throwing the Discovery crew 1,000 years in the future, they should have just started a whole nother show set in the 32nd century, which apparently was the original plan. But I think they were sick of all the backlash they were getting from Discovery being a prequel to the original series, and so wanted to change that. And I don't know, because I don't think because they seem to ignore the fact that they're from the 23rd century. Like, she seems to know a lot about the, Cardassians and the Breen and all these other things. And as far as I know, they weren't aware of these aliens in the 23rd century. And she's aware of events that took place in the 24th century. Like, looking at she doesn't know what a fucking visor is, or that baseball, what that means. Unless she just read it in a history book or whatever. I don't know. But I was thinking about this though, and the way it could be spun to be interesting is that these people from the 23rd century came and revitalized. This is definitely a point of season 3 anyway. They revitalized the Federation that was dead and dying and barely surviving, and so they're building it up, which is what we see in these seasons. And with Tilly being an important figure at Starfleet Academy, they're building it up. And at the end of the episode, we get Dakota with Burnham being an admiral and really important figure in Starfleet. So you could bring it around to say that Starfleet was dying and it needed that injection from the 23rd century when the Federation was at its strongest. Well, not as strongest as its 24th, or even after that. But no, when the Federation was strong, and to have that fresh injection of people who were more optimistic, who hadn't given up, and that's what made a brighter future. So that's the way I can spin it, to see, that's what justifies them. I just wish that they would have actually mentioned this a bit more. And the scene with Burnham and Book by the beach was nice. I actually was really hoping that they would get back together. And I love actually that they did a season-long arc of them getting back, of recovering from their breakup in season 4, and Book betraying her, because and I love how they didn't just hand wave that away, and they mentioned there was they still had a rapport, and they still worked together in this season, but there was still a rift between them. And the episode 4 touched on this a bit when she went to the past when they were still together, and how that brought a lot of emotions up for her, and how how much she missed him. And so I think this was a great conclusion to that. So I really loved. Again, this is another great relationship. Discovery is actually pretty good at relationships, I will say. Other than Voyager, which completely fucked it up. Tom and B'Elanna do not work at all. I don't care what anyone says. That's zero chemistry. But anyway, and where on the other hand, Discovery has Book and Burnham, and has Stamets and Culber, and Saru and the Vulcan lady. That's a great couple. So the Discovery is just much better at couples. But anyway, so yeah, that was a great conclusion. And so this is what I think, because I talked before about, and I read articles that said that when they learned that Discovery was being canceled, they went back and shot more footage to make it feel like more of a series finale. And so my guess is that originally that scene at the end where when they're on the beach and Burnham's little infinity symbol starts glowing, and they're like, Kovacs has a mission for us, and her and Book go off, that's originally where the episode was going to end. And so it would be implied, there will get more adventures with Burnham and Book in the next season. But when they learned the show was being canceled, they went back and filmed that coda that showed them as old people. Now, that's just my guess. I have no evidence for this. In the Ready Room thing, the interview with Michelle Paradise, showrunner, she did mention that, it was nice we got to go back and reshoot that coda. So I think she's pretty much flat out saying, yeah, they shot that later, and that's why they pushed the release date of Discovery back, because they wanted to add that coda into it. But, I don't know if they could have filmed extra scenes before that not just that. Because this was, even before you got to that coda, it was already an extra long episode, and they usually don't do extra long episodes for season finales. So I got the impression that the only reason why the episode was as long as it was because it's the series finale, which tradition, other than Enterprise, to do a double episode for a series finale. Although Picard didn't do, but I don't know, I never saw that as a series, because Picard, the whole show was just a bit of a mess. And by the way, one thing I know for certain is I do like Discovery better than Picard. That's one thing, seeing Discovery finish and seeing the end and how it ended and how it came together, I think it's a better show than Picard. Picard was just too much of a mess, and it was all over the fucking place. But where I was stuck on is whether or not I think it's a better show than Enterprise. Because the thing with Enterprise, the first 2 seasons were horrendous, some of the worst Star Trek writing. It was just bad in almost every way. But then the 3rd season was amazing. One of my favorites. That is top 5 for me for the Star Trek franchise. And the 4th season was pretty good too. Not as amazing as season 3, but still pretty good. Definitely way better than the first 2 seasons. So Enterprise is kind of split like that. Whereas Discovery has 3 mediocre seasons, or mixed bag seasons, I should say. Season 1, I'm less and less on. The more I go back and watch it, I think, it's not that good. So I think that's a poor season. Season 2 is a mixed bag because the Pike stuff is great, and there's some other great character moments with Burnham and Spock, but other moments that are just terrible and that suck. Yeah, and then season 3, I think, was mostly a failure. Not as bad as season 1, but it had some interesting moments again with them revitalizing Starfleet and introducing us to the 32nd century. But the through storyline with the burn was terrible, and they had that mustache twirly villain with Osiris, who was one of the worst villains they've ever had on the show. So season 3 was kind of poor as well, but then you get up to season 4, which was mostly amazing. It just had a few stupid moments, like them, wrestling or whatever, and playing poker, and a few other, they stretched the storyline too thin. It would have been better if it was 8 or 9 episodes and not 13. So still wasn't perfect, but it was really good, and had a great conclusion, great character stories. And season 5, near perfect, I think, having a through adventure that makes a lot of sense, a lot of good character moments, a lot of just good episode after good episode. The first 3 episodes were kind of iffy. They weren't bad, but they were just averagely good. But then once you get into episode 4, the rest of the season just takes off and flies. And to borrow Burnham's phrase, and yeah, the finale was not the ultimate amazing conclusion, but it was good enough. And so it's hard to compare those 2 shows, where you have, on one hand, you have a show with 2 horrible seasons, 1 amazing season, and 1 pretty good season, where you have the other show with a fairly bad season, a mixed bag season, a fairly bad season, a great season, and an awesome season. So I think I would have to actually give Discovery the slight edge over Enterprise, but it's particularly because the characters are more interesting. That's what really probably puts it over the edge for me. I think, yeah, as I said, I think it's better than Prodigy as well, but we only had 1 season of that so far, so hard to judge, but I definitely would say that. but not better than Lower Decks or Strange New Worlds, and I don't think I would call it better than Voyager, even though, but again, it's hard to compare with Voyager because that's had 7 seasons and a lot of mediocre episodes, but a few amazing episodes that are better than most of what Discovery has done. So it's hard to compare, but I think I'd give the slight edge to Voyager. Anyway, that was a huge tangent. What was I even talking about? I was talking about how I believe they went back and they reshot that coda. And I'm glad they did. I'm very glad they did. I love the coda. It was probably my favorite part of the episode. If you're familiar with my channel, you might know my style, that I tend to like nice, endings that wrap everything up. I'm a fan of that. I've heard the term anticlimactic used before, but and they like more sudden endings, but I totally disagree with that viewpoint. I love when everything is tied up and nice and wrapped up in a nice little bow. And so I think that this final scene of Discovery, the coda scene, did a really good job of that. I think it was really good seeing them. And I just love when series finales do that. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but I think for good reason, because it's a good way to end the show by showing the main characters of how they look years later once they're older. Now, All Good Things did a cheat with that because it just showed a possible future. Same with Endgame. I roll. But at least it worked in All Good Things, and that's all I'll say about that. But anyway, but they were doing movies and stuff, and so they didn't want to tie themselves in the corner. But here's the thing. I think that this ending, even though it jumps in the future, does leave room for more stuff with the characters in between. I think that's why we didn't see any characters in the present day of this future other than Book and Burnham, because those are the only two we know for certain how their future turns out. The other ones we just see in memory flashback thingies, and so we don't know what happened to them. Maybe they're dead, and plus I'm glad they did this, because I think it would have been silly if they put old people makeup on everyone in game. Excuse me. And I think it was actually a good choice. And so there's, even with Burnham and Book, there's still a lot of things you could do with them in between. And so the future is still wide open, and so there's still a lot of opportunity to do stuff in between that time period if they're going to use these characters again, which I think is extremely likely. I am very positive that a lot of these characters will pop up in Starfleet Academy show, especially Tilly. If Tilly's not a main character, I will be shocked. And she even mentioned, I'm starting this mentor program. So, in the next show, So yeah, I think we will see some of these characters again. And so it leaves it open for that, and I love seeing the way the Burnham and Book being happy years and years later. That's just a perfect way to tie this whole show together. I think it's a beautiful ending. And the whole time they were talking, it's please say that they have children. Please say that they have children. And then when the son shows up saying he's going to be a captain, I was like, yes, they have the son. That's so cool. And then when she goes on Discovery and she just has the memory of everyone she loved, that it reminded me a bit of the ending of Lost. I would say how they're in the church and everyone's together hugging and everything, but I think this is better. Because for one thing, it doesn't it ruined the entire show the way that ending did. No one will even get into that. But the other thing is, I actually think it's better than actually having the people there, because it shows how her And this is something I feel like other Star Trek shows should have done that didn't. Well, DS9 had that very sentimental ending, so they probably touched on it a bit. And Next Gen did have the poker game, but I feel like it didn't touch enough on how there is a family and something that would stick with them for the rest of their lives, and that they will always have fond memories of this family. And I think that ending with Burnham, like, imagining like all the people she worked with. They brought back Detmer and Owoshkin for this scene, and Reno was there, and I don't think Kanan was there though. I guess she's off saying yum yum. Maybe she was. I didn't notice that, but yeah, I think that was actually beautiful. I think that was a beautiful way to wrap up the show and to show that how this was a family. And they still leave it open to do more stuff with these characters. So yeah, I thought that I was shedding a tear by a way. I will admit that during that ending. I thought it was beautiful. Now, the thing with Zora, some people hated this. I didn't hate it, but it is kind of yada yada, we gotta tie this into Calypso. Now, to be fair, I'd actually prefer this to them not addressing Calypso at all. That would irritate me. I know there was people had theories about episode 4 that maybe that was implying Calypso all took place in Zora's head or something like that. And I've heard a bunch of different theories, and that's not good enough. I wouldn't like if they just, maybe this happened there. Because Calypso in the timeline doesn't make any sense. So I'm glad they had it make sense. Now, did seem kind of contrived, we gotta tie this in, so let's just have Burnham take Discovery on some red directive mission to leave her floating in space for 1,000 years because they even mentioned the name Craft. But then again, this leaves it open for a spin-off show or stuff they could do further with Craft, because that Calypso short ended in kind of a cliffhanger. So it could leave it open for that. And yeah, sure, it did seem kind of contrived, but if, Kovich is Crewman Daniels, then he would know, he might know future-y things because he was into time travel and stuff. But again, it gives that same feeling that Culber had early in the episode that we know this is what needs to happen. And I actually thought it was beautiful the way that Burnham says that you will know future generations and you will know what happened, all this, what other generations will be like and whatnot. I actually thought that was beautiful. But I will say, I think the part of why this ending felt jarring and kind of contrived was because that Zora was underused this season. That is one of my main complaints of the season as a whole. She barely appears. Like, season 4 did a lot of good character stories with her and exploring what it meant to her. And they even said, you're officially a member of the crew. And they didn't touch on that at all. For most of the season, she was just acting like the computer and didn't really have much of a personality. There were a few scenes here and there, but I don't think they really handled her very well. I think they kind of sidelined her for this season. Now, maybe they originally had plans to bring her back, more importantly, in future seasons, but we don't get any future seasons. So I think maybe that would help with this ending a bit. But I'll have to go back and watch Calypso and see just how much this... And apparently they had the reconstructing Discovery to make it look like it did before it got retrofitted. Yeah, that was, let's have it fit into the short. It's kind of like Pike saying, rip the holographic emitters out of the Enterprise. But I don't think it's the worst thing ever. I'm okay with it. It is a bit silly. I will admit, and a bit like, oh, we're tying this in. But as I said, there was parts of it I loved. I loved the way Burnham was interacting with Zora, and I loved the memories of her. I thought it was a great way to end the show. So I think they did a good job with that. So my rating for Life Itself out of 10, I'm going to give this a 9. Excellent. Can't quite bring myself to give it a 10 because it wasn't as satisfying as an ending as I hoped it would be. I think they should have brought Locke back to life. I think that the stuff with Discovery, the battle stuff with them, was kind of underplayed. It was wasn't really that interesting. It wasn't terrible, but it really wasn't that interesting. And yeah, the stuff at the end with Zora was kind of a little silly. Oh, let's tie this in. But you did have a lot of great character moments in this. And I also had mixed feelings about the fact that Burnham was leaving the progenitor technology behind. Even though I agree with that decision, I still feels like it wasn't earned enough to make the whole journey of the season worthwhile. But kind of was, because you had great character revelations, a character journey with Burnham that she went through, and I loved the interaction she had with the progenitors. It was really powerful. The special effects, of course, are always amazing, and it was amazing, and this episode as well. And you had a lot of good character moments, as I was saying, throughout the whole episode, with a lot of the different characters and tying it together. And I think the ending, you got Saru's wedding. I didn't even mention that because that did go by rather quickly, but it was still good to see that and how they really tied. What I love about this episode is how they tied it together and made it feel like a family. That it was memories that would stick with them forever, and it was an inescapable experience. I never really got that from Discovery before. And by the way, I talked a lot before about Discovery being overly sentimental, and I wanted to be clear, this episode is not. This episode is appropriately sentimental, and it does it effectively. My complaint about earlier seasons is there are a lot of times when they overdid it, or they did it in places it wasn't appropriate, and it wasn't earned. That's the word I'm looking for, earned. It's not that, I hate emotions, whatever. I love emotions. I love when they do emotional, sentimental stuff. But it's got to be earned. Otherwise, it just comes off as hokey. And that's why I was absolutely not just okay, but I actually loved what they did in this episode, because it was earned. So yeah. But can't bring myself to give it a 10, but I will give it a 9. So, that is it for my review of Star Trek Discovery, Season 5. And as I said at the start of this video, I will be doing a live discussion with my sister Alyssa this coming Monday night, where we're going to talk about Season 5 of Discovery as a whole. It's 9 p.m. East Coast time in the U.S. I'll put the link in the description below so you can check it out. And if you want to know what time it is in your own time zone, you can click the link and it will tell you. But yeah, please join us for that. We're going to break down the season of Discovery, Season 5. And you can continue to check out my channel as I continue to cover Star Trek at the moment, covering Star Trek The Next Generation, just getting into Season 5, about to start that. And doing many other videos on many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. Thanks a lot for watching.